Welcome, everyone. Today we are unpacking how language constructs knowledge and how rhetorical strategies shape clarity and persuasion, particularly in applied linguistics and social sciences. Before we dive in, here is something to reflect on. Does the language researchers shape the way we understand knowledge? Are certain rhetorical strategies clarifying ideas, or are they actually obscuring meaning? We'll explore this through real-world examples, scenarios, and critical reflections on academic discourse. First, how language constructs knowledge. One of the key takeaways here is that language isn't just a tool to share knowledge. It actively constructs it. Every decision an author makes, whether choosing specific words, structuring sentences in a certain way, or framing arguments, affects how we interpret research, how seriously we take its findings, and even how future research responds to it. Consider vocabulary choices, for example. If a study describes migration using the phrase, "This study examines the impact of illegal immigrants on the host country's labor market," compare that to, "This study explores how undocumented workers contribute to the host country's labor market." These two sentences describing the same concept but frame it differently. The first presents the group using criminalizing language, while the second is neutral and emphasizes economic participation. This is an example of how lexical choices, meaning the words used in a text, carry ideological weight. Beyond vocabulary, sentence structure can also shape interpretation. Academic writing often relies on nominalization, which means turning verbs into nouns in a way that removes agency. For example, a decision was made to exclude data. This phrasing doesn't tell us who made the decision. It keeps responsibility vague. Compare it to, the research team excluded 5 incomplete surveys after verifying missing responses. This version is transparent, specifying exactly who took action. When reviewing academic work, we need to ask, is the language being used clear and responsible? Or is it designed to obscure accountability? On the other hand, framing matters too. A paper might state, "Traditional lecture-based instruction has failed the students in rural regions." This wording sounds absolute, as if the matter is settled. But if we say, "This study examines the limitations of lecture-based instruction in rural regions," suddenly the phrasing opens the conversation rather than shutting it down. This is an example of epistemic modality, meaning a linguistic tool that allows authors to express the level of certainty behind their claims. Words like may, could, possibly, and suggests help writers communicate ideas cautiously rather than overstating them. Today, I'll walk you through how to approach a linguistic analysis of published articles, focusing on 4 powerful tools: nominalization, epistemic modality, reflection, and diffusive language. Let's take each in turn. 1. Nominalization. The definition is nominalization is a process of turning verbs or adjectives into nouns. The explanation is it often makes writing more abstract and formal and can obscure agency or responsibility in a sentence. For example, instead of saying, "The committee decided to delay the project," a nominalized version would be, "The decision to delay the project was made." Here the agent, the committee, disappears, which can make the text sound more objective or evasive. why it matters. And critical analysis identifying nominalization helps us question how power and responsibility are constructed or concealed in academic or policy texts. The next is epistemic modality. Epistemic modality refers to the expression of certainty, possibility, or doubt in language. Words like may, might, likely, possible, certainly, and must show how confident the writer is about a claim. For example, compare these two sentences. Students fail due to lack of effort versus students may fail due to a lack of effort. The second version hedges the claim, suggesting it's one possibility among many. Analyzing epistemic modality helps us uncover whether a text invites dialogues or asserts authority. It tells us how authors position their knowledge, tentative, probable, or definitive. The third is reflection. Reflection refers to the writer's or a speaker's engagement with their own thinking, stance, or learning process. It's often marked by first-person language, like I think, we believe, it seems to me, or evaluative verbs and adverbs. For example, this suggests a need to reconsider our assumptions, or I now realize that. Reflection shows a critical or developmental stance. In academic or professional texts, it signals transparency, humility, or growth, and helps position the writer ethically. The last but not least is deficit language. Deficit language frames individuals or groups in terms of what they lack rather than what they bring. It's often used in discussions of marginalized groups and can subtly reinforce stereotypes. Consider, for example, this statement. Low-income students lack motivation and skills, and contrasted with low-income students face systemic barriers to accessing opportunities. Identifying deficit language is crucial for equity-focused critique. It shifts the lens from blaming individuals to interrogating structures and, consequently, these tools, nominalization, epistemic modality, reflection, and deficit language help us go beyond content and examine how language shapes meaning, power, and ideology in published texts, whether you're analyzing a journal article, a news editorial, or a policy paper. These strategies equip you to engage critically, ethically, and linguistically. Now, let's look at actual academic scenarios where language choices influence perception and shape research discussions. The first scenario, scenario 1, politically framed abstracts. Imagine a study on language teaching in Arab classrooms. The original abstract reads, "This groundbreaking study reveals the complete failure of communicative language teaching in Arab classrooms." What's the issue here? Overclaiming. Phrasing it as a complete failure shuts down discussion. Here we have cultural essentialism. The sentence generalizes Arab classrooms as inherently flawed. We also have rhetorical inflation. Words like groundbreaking exaggerate findings. A more responsible revision would be, this study investigates challenges in implementing communicative language teaching approaches in Arab classrooms, highlighting institutional and pedagogical constraints. This version preserves accuracy while avoiding bias framing. Now let's take a look at the second scenario, scenario 2. The illusion of consensus is what we call it. Some academic papers create the impression that their claims are universally accepted. For example, It is well known that code switching disrupts cognitive processing. This statement suggests universal agreement, but is this actually well known? A more accurate phrasing would be some studies, for example, X or Y, have argued that code switching may influence cognitive load under certain conditions. This revision acknowledges debate rather than forcing consensus. Now let's take a look at the third scenario, ambiguity in results. Consider this vague statement in a research paper. A marginal effect was noted in fluency scores. What does marginal mean here? A statistically non-significant or a slightly significant? Instead, clarity can be achieved with fluency scores improve slightly when p equals 0.08, though not reaching conventional levels of statistical significance. By specifying numerical values, the results become transparent. But how rhetorical strategies affect persuasion? Beyond vocabulary and framing, researchers use rhetorical techniques to strengthen their arguments, but sometimes they distort meaning. For example, authors sometimes misrepresent previous studies to make their own work seem more novel. A paper might say, unlike previous studies that ignored learner context, this paper. This unfairly dismisses past research. A better phrasing would be, while previous studies focus on learner proficiency, this study extends the discussion by incorporating contextual variables. Another issue is deficit language, which frames certain groups or individuals negatively. Compare these two statements. Error patterns reveal learner failure, or error patterns suggest developmental stages in interlanguage. The first pathologizes learners, implying inadequacy. The second presents errors as part of natural language development. Now here we are with the final review guidelines. When analyzing academic writing, pay attention to epistemic markers. Are claims hedged with words like may, could, or suggests, or are they exaggerated? Pay attention to agency and responsibility. Does the text use passive voice to hide accountability? Consider tone and stance. Does the author respect differing viewpoints, or are they dismissive? Focus on jargon density. Does technical terminology clarify, or does it create false authority? And also, pay attention to persuasive techniques. Are arguments built on solid reasoning, or are they manipulating perception? And last but not least, consider ideological framing. Is the language neutral, or does it reflect hidden biases? And here we are with the closing thoughts. The way scholars use language affects not just how knowledge is communicated, but how knowledge is constructed. That's a very important concept.